Between going to community college and art school, I have taken God knows how many hours worth of drawing classes. I've taken like every foundation drawing class at least twice. Those classes typically lasted for hours. So in community college, I want to say they were 2 3-hour classes maybe. And at MCAD, they were each like an observational drawing class was 1 5-hour class a week. So figure drawing class, same deal, 5-hour class. And I always hated drawing classes. Even when I liked them, I hated them. I thought they were mildly interesting, but mostly I found them exhausting and boring and kind of tiring. And I realized today, and this kind of circles back to stuff I talk about a lot, that the model that drawing is taught in an art school is totally at odds with anything that would ever work for me. So the way that you draw is like you do a bunch of small little drawings. You know, in a figure drawing class, you do a 30-second gesture, and then a 1-minute gesture, and then a 5-minute longer drawing, and you build up until you start doing these really long poses. Excuse me, I'm gonna burp. Excuse me, that was shitty. No, it wasn't. It was awesome. And then in an observational drawing class, it's kind of the same deal, but less gestural, but you can build up to longer drawings. You experiment with different materials. I always loved the beginning chunk of class where you're burning through paper, doing these short sort of drawings. But then once it got into the longer stuff, I hated it. And I only liked it if the teacher made you do something like erase everything you'd drawn and then kind of rebuild the scaffolding of the drawing. Then it appealed to me. It occurs to me that the reason that's true is, in general, I don't have a high tolerance for a long period of work on a single activity. So when I do like a big design project, the way for that to work for me, I have to break it into to-do lists that I can then view the project as really small little chunks. So it's like, read this, brainstorm on this, research this, sketch this, pull scrap on this, layout on mood board or whatever the stuff is. But it's like, sorry, my fingers over the lens. It's got to be divided up into really small little chunks, and then I'll be motivated to do it. If it's just one big amorphous thing, I get really bored and I lose steam and I start to spin my wheels. I have to have very kind of tactical things to be doing. And it occurs to me that drawing doesn't really have those small chunks, so I only enjoyed the drawing when it was the small chunks. When it was small chunked out as fast drawing, another drawing, a slightly longer drawing, all that stuff was fine. It was once it got into the really longer periods or the homework assignment, we're supposed to spend 6 hours or 12 hours on a drawing, that I would just completely lose it and just did not care. I rarely spent the amount of time on my homework that you're supposed to spend on it, because I'm not about to spend 12 hours doing anything, especially not a goddamn drawing. So the fundamental structure of those drawing classes was wired in a way that doesn't work for me. And as such, I failed miserably. And if I look at any art school experience, a painting class, I'm trying to think of anything else, any class that demanded long, extended periods of concentration on a single activity, I did terrible at. In particular, and this was true of community college versus art school. And I bring up that distinction because I was a much better student in community college because I had a lot less attachment to outcomes. I was more fascinated by everything. So as a result of being fascinated by everything, I tended not to get creative block. And I noticed that the things I procrastinated on in community college were drawing and painting. When I got to art school, At first, those were the things I procrastinated on. Eventually, I procrastinated on everything, but that's because I was constantly wrestling with creative block because I was so attached to the outcomes. Just a distinction. So, backing this up, the big issue was like I was a terrible student within a certain model because that model doesn't match with my wiring. The best case scenario is I would torture myself and get through it. But that sucks. Like, I would love to be able to take back every fucking hour I spent making a drawing I didn't give a fuck about in an environment I didn't give a fuck about. I never was like, got out of drawing class and was like, that was the best possible use of 5 hours of my life. And I procrastinated on the homework, not because I was lazy, but who wants to spend 12 hours on a fucking drawing? But that was the model. Now, what's interesting to me is like, if I wanted to start drawing today and I wanted to get good at it, I know exactly how I would do it. Exactly. I would start with, I'd probably go to Target. Maybe I'd go to the art supply store. I would buy a cheap sketchbook or a cheap pad of paper that I sort of liked, and I'd get a bunch of different tools, all extremely cheap, and I would play with them, and I would play with subject matter, and I would probably start out drawing 5 minutes a day, tops. And I would connect it to another activity. So maybe I would draw while I had my coffee. Maybe I would draw before I watched Charles Bronson movies at night. Maybe I would draw before dinner. I would do so little drawing that I would never feel super invested in it, and I would do it in a way where something that immediately followed it was a reward for doing it. And that's how I would do it. And I would build up, because what would happen is it would be fun in and of itself, and it would be so non-committal that eventually I would draw 6 minutes a day, 7, then 8, then 20. I know me. I know how I'm wired. That's what would happen. Eventually, I would wake up on Saturday mornings, probably ignore my children, so that I could draw for an hour. And I guarantee that after a couple weeks of those little crappy, non-committal, experimental but fun drawings, I would probably make drawings that were better than anything I had produced in serious art school that I am still paying for right now. You know, like I'm going to get a check from work on Friday, and hundreds of dollars of that check are going to go to different loan institutions for drawing classes that were fucking useless. Now that's not to say they're useless for everyone. They're useless for me. They're probably useless for a lot of other people. But they're treated as if this is the way that you learn how to draw. But at this point, I know how I learn how to draw. If I wanted to draw, I could trick myself into making drawing the funnest thing I had ever done in my life, the most rewarding thing, and I would get myself addicted to it, at which point eventually I would start committing big chunks of time to it, and I would never procrastinate. And if anything, I would procrastinate on stuff that I would normally do for fun. So I'd procrastinate on my procrastination activities, like going for walks, like going to get iced coffees, like watching Charles Bronson movies. What I think is interesting is like that's the power of figuring out how exactly you're wired, and that most things are a waste of time until you figure that out. Like, if you dropped out of high school, there is a real, like, no, I was going to say there's a good chance. No, there's like pretty much 100% chance high school is set up for a certain type of wiring. You don't have that wiring. I don't care if you drop out just to skateboard or to sell drugs. You're wired in a way to work through life in a certain fashion, and school is counterproductive to that. period. It's not like, yeah, I think that's it 100%. And it's funny because I look back on school and I can now pick out, like, why did that class go well and why did that class fail? And I can then do things like I can pick up a new habit relatively quickly, know whether I should continue with it, and also know whether I'm going to get good at it. That's a powerful thing to have figured out, but man, I wished I had figured it out 15, 20 years ago. I wish that in a drawing class, someone would have said, you don't actually seem to do homework. Do you do homework in your other classes? And I'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, I do so much graphic design homework. And they'd be like, why is that? And it's like, you know, you're supposed to do a certain amount of hours for credits, but is the real point to do the work, or is the real point to get good or better at something? Who knows? I mean, I guess like in the nature of student loans and accreditation, the goal is just to put in the hours, but of course they still grade you, so you're supposed to get good at it. But there's no avenue to get good at it. Like, I would just guess so many people get C's in drawing, not because they're lazy, but because it was fucking torture just to get the C. I mean, that's how I feel about drawing. Like, it was fucking torture. Like, drawing a naked person for 45 minutes is a very annoying way of spending my time in general. But now, if for some reason I wanted to get good at drawing the figure, I know the framework that I would use, and it wouldn't look anything like what they do in an art school. Long-winded, ranty video, but the point is not that you should not spend focused amounts of time on it. Not that you should not read the manual, which is like another thing I hate to do. But if you can start to deconstruct your wiring and your working methods, you can figure out what you're capable of, and you can figure out how to learn things, which is super valuable. And you can figure out how to take your bad habits and make them work for you. You know, and chances are most of your bad habits are not really bad habits. They're just things that aren't the way we're supposed to do this shit. So, thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed, subscribe already. Get me attention. At the very least, if you subscribe, maybe they'll remonetize my channel because they changed it and now I can't make money. I can't make my $2 a month anymore that pays for half an iced coffee. So, thanks for watching. Take it easy.